Welcome back, everybody. Well, for the past several days, we have been watching on our television screens as history unfolds. Things that people generations from now will be watching videos of and talking about. Just as we watch the events, for example, of the funeral for King George VI or the coronation for Queen Elizabeth II. Now here we are 70 years later watching in real time as these day-to-day events unfold. And it seems like every single day there's something new that is just incredible to watch about all of this. And so I thought I would take a little time today and just kind of watch through some of what happened today, which most of what happened today unfolded in Edinburgh, Scotland. There was a little bit this morning at Westminster Hall, but we're going to pick up the events in Edinburgh when the king and his family arrived there to take part in some ceremonies, not only at Holyrood House Palace, but also then up the Royal Mile to St. Giles Cathedral. And I was just there like a month and a half ago, so pretty excited to watch these things that happen in places that I just walked only weeks ago. So join me as we do that. So one of the really kind of strange things that we're seeing this time that we wouldn't have seen in years past is it seems like everywhere either the king goes or the body of the queen goes, we get these helicopter shots kind of following them all the way along as they go. And in this case, we saw the king and the queen consort land at Edinburgh Airport. They've got the roads basically blocked off so that they can drive through without traffic, because I understand that the traffic normally at this time going in to Edinburgh from the airport would not be necessarily all that easy. But they're going to come in and they're going to go right past Edinburgh Castle, which is just this imposing thing. Like when you go to Edinburgh, you just see the castle, unless you're somewhere where the buildings block it. And when you go to the top, boy, Edinburgh's built on an extinct, well, I don't know if it's extinct, I think it's extinct, volcano. And you have these places where parts of the volcano stick up, like the rock that Edinburgh Castle's built on. And you have Arthur's Seat, and you have the Salzburg Crags, which overlook the city, and there are these different vantage points you can climb up to and just get incredible views, not only of the city, but all the way out to the North Sea. So it looks like they haven't quite made it to the old town yet, to where the Royal Mile is, but they're making their way in that direction. And let me just kind of show you a map, so as we talk about this stuff, you kind of get a sense of where everything is. So first we'll kind of look at a map here and get a sense a little bit. Here's the border between England and Scotland. Scotland is about 2/3 the size of the state of Ohio. That's kind of how I explained it to my kids when we were there, to kind of get a sense. But it takes a long time to get anywhere once you get into the Highlands. So like, for example, going from Glasgow up to Portree on the Isle of Skye, even though it's here in Ohio, that would be like a maybe 2.5 hour drive. It's like a 5-hour drive in Scotland, just because of the nature of the roads and everything. But Edinburgh's here. It's the capital city of Scotland. Glasgow is just like an hour away, and it's the largest city in Scotland. But so here's Edinburgh, and you can see here the North Sea, which is part of the ocean, and it comes in right here to Edinburgh, and then the Firth of Forth is there. So here's Edinburgh Castle. And I'm going to switch over to this view here. So what we're going to see is they're going to start down here at the Palace of Holyrood House. And you'll see right behind it is Holyrood Abbey, which was, I think, destroyed during that same period when a lot of the abbeys were destroyed in England during that Protestant kind of takeover of the church in England and Scotland. But that was kind of her primary residence in Scotland. And she was just there back in June. Actually, she was there like the week before we were in Scotland. Our Airbnb was this building right here when we stayed in Edinburgh. We were on the second floor of this red building. So we were right there. You're going to see the Canongate Church. I did a video there, which is where Adam Smith, the famous economist, is buried there. Here's the Scottish Parliament building right there. And there were kids swimming in these pools here. And then you got this big, beautiful park right here. And then this is Salzburg Crags, which you'll probably see some views from the top of that during the course of what we're going to watch. My boys and I climbed it. You go right over this way and you climb right up here, and it's got an incredible view up there. And then Arthur's Seat is the real high point, and that takes a lot longer to get to because it's a bit higher than Salzburg Crags. And so the Royal Mile, as it's called, is a little less than a mile, but it's the road that runs between the Palace of Holyrood House, goes right up this road right here. There's St. Giles Cathedral, where the ceremonies are going to take place today. The service is going to take place. Yesterday they did this whole ceremony where they proclaimed the king, and that all took place, I think, from this area too, right in here. And then from there you go up and there's a church right here. And then this is the area where in the shots we'll see they still have all the stands set up from when they did the royal tattoo, which I hear is phenomenal. And then there is Edinburgh Castle, such a historic place. So here they are actually going past the castle, and there you can see they're still taking down the stands from the royal tattoo, which is like this month-long thing that they do every night with these incredible processions and military displays and stuff. And they're going to be coming in here, and they're going to be turning onto the Royal Mile, which is right down through here, and that's where all the people are gathered. And it's a busy place anyway. We spent pretty much our whole time in Edinburgh on the Royal Mile. There's shops all the way along. There's pubs and restaurants and all these great places to visit. It's just really, really cool. Now, the sidewalks aren't nearly this wide. They've obviously got the whole road blocked off, but normally it's a road you can drive up and down just like you could any other road. Pretty fascinating stuff. Let's just kind of watch for a minute and listen to it. You see the king in that front car with the
Yesterday afternoon,
flag.
The mournful sight of the hearse carrying Queen Elizabeth II down this very cobbled street, and a welcome now for King Charles III.
Now, some of my fellow Americans and maybe other countries where we have kind of a different culture, we might kind of find it weird. Like, for example, yesterday when the Queen's hearse came through here and they delivered her body to Holyrood Palace, people were clapping. And it seems like an odd thing to clap for someone, but that's a common way of showing respect and honor to someone when they passed away. You'll see this very often at football matches there, where they'll do a minute's applause. You know, we tend to do a moment of silence here in America, and they do that sometimes there too. But they'll tend to do a minute's applause as a way of remembering someone, which I think is really, really cool. And so you'll see that happen. And the Queen Consort with him.
Through the Lawn Market, down the High Street, and to the Canongate.
So yeah, this whole road going from the palace down at the bottom of the Royal Mile, I say bottom because it is uphill the whole way. I mean, you are walking uphill the entire Royal Mile up to Edinburgh Castle, and it's downhill all the way back. The whole city's built like on a hill, at least that old city part of it. And you definitely get your exercise walking around there. Amazing city, though. Amazing city. Seems like they lose the signal every so often here. So now here we're looking from behind, looking up the Royal Mile, which is right here. And again, I mean, I'm just thinking about the fact that when my family and I were there, our Airbnb was like right there. So if we had been there during all this, we could have looked out our window and seen the whole thing happen. There's a cemetery right here. There's another one at the Canongate Church. Up here, you have like the Acropolis, which was like this unfinished attempt at remaking what they have in Greece. There's the Holyrood Abbey right there, where some of the monarchs of Scotland, their remains are to this day. And I tell you, this is one of the things that I've noticed already about King Charles that seems to be different. And it's good that, you know, while he's got a lot he can learn from his mother about how she did things and did them so well, over a 70-year reign. He's his own man, and he has no trouble at all. And it's especially nice to see this in the age of the aftermath of COVID, to see this new king just getting out repeatedly. And he's done this multiple times now and just greeting people. Really, really cool for him to connect. And I saw a poll recently where they said that 1/3 of people in the UK said they had either met the Queen or seen her in person. I don't know what the number is here in the U.S. as far as who have met or seen in person a president, but I'm guessing it's got to be far less than 1/3. I have never met a president, but I've seen in person 2 presidents. But really, really cool stuff.
Also the Sheriff Principal of Lothian and Borders.
So this next part's pretty cool. We're going to watch here. There's an actual, a lot of this, and nobody does, I don't think, ceremony and kind of displays like this better than the British do. And there's a very formal process that comes from all of this. And you're going to have this guy who's going to present the keys to the city of Edinburgh to the king. And then there's this whole thing where he's going to say something in return. But we'll kind of watch this play out.
And keeping an eye on everything, the tunicked figure of the garrison sergeant major.
And you see here, this is the standard, the royal standard for Scotland, and they've got it flying at half-mast, but you've got these guys standing there waiting, because when the king arrives, they're going to raise it all the way up, and then when he leaves, they'll lower it again.
Of Edinburgh Castle. And still waiting at half-mast, the traditional lion rampant flag that flies here.
Either that, or I don't know if they'll switch the flag and they'll put the royal standard.
Key of the city of Edinburgh waiting to be presented to the king.
I would have to think that everybody involved with this has probably rehearsed and re-rehearsed exactly what they've got to do in their minds. They all know what their part is, and nobody wants to be the one that screws this up, right?
The councillors from the City Council of Edinburgh who have come with the symbols of the City Council and a posy of flowers for the Queen Consort.
Man, flower shops
looking at quite a few
right
of
now.
the flowers that have been left here in memory of the Queen.
And here you see what I think the unit in the world with the absolute best uniforms, right? The Royal Regiment of Scotland. They've actually undergone a change. I think it was about 20 years ago that they restructured how the British military was. And, they used to have, if you look at World War I, World War II, you've got the 51st Highland Division, and you've got all these different units, and they've restructured all of that. So now all of the Scottish units are in one regiment. I think there's 5 battalions in the Royal Regiment of Scotland. One of them's the Black Watch. In fact, let's take a look at that. Okay, so the 2nd Battalion of the Royal Scottish Regiment is the 1st Battalion is the Royal Scots Borderers, and you can actually see a map here kind of showing the traditional areas of recruiting for those. 1st Battalion, Royal Scots Borderers. 2nd one, Royal Highland Fusiliers. 3rd one, the Black Watch, my absolute favorite regiment on the planet. Now just a battalion. The 4th is the Highlanders, and then the 5th is the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders. But they're all now part of the Royal Scots Regiment. And then they all have Royal Colonel-in-Chief, which is like a ceremonial head of that unit. Right now, the king is the Colonel-in-Chief of the Black Watch. Awesome. The 2nd Battalion, 4th Battalion, 5th Battalion are all vacant because of the death of the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh. But I'm sure that at some point, when appropriate, the king will fill those. But just love their uniforms with the tartan, the kilt. It all works. It works really, really well. So here he's going to explain exactly what's going to happen with this key ceremony, which is just one of many things that we've already seen. These very specific things that take place, these ceremonial but also sometimes legal procedures that have to be gone through.
When finally the keys are presented to His Majesty, the Lord Provost will say, "We, the Lord Provost and the members of the City of Edinburgh Council, welcome Your Majesty to the capital city of your ancient and hereditary Kingdom of Scotland, and offer for your gracious acceptance the keys of Your Majesty's good city of Edinburgh." The King will then touch them and return them by saying, "I return these keys being perfectly convinced that they cannot be placed in better hands than those of the Lord Provost and councillors of my good city of Edinburgh."
And there, right there, is a beautiful shot of Edinburgh Castle right there. And the Royal Mile goes right down this way. And then right over here, you have kind of the newer part of the city. And I think right there is I think that's the Scott Monument right there. I believe this has it's the tallest monument in the UK to a single person. But you've got like the barracks up here and the headquarters of the Royal Scots Regiment. It's an active military facility. And one of the cool things they do is every day at 1 o'clock, we got to be there for it. In fact, maybe I'll pull up the video and show it to you. They fire the gun, and it startles people in the city who aren't ready for it. So there are the guns. When we were there was just one, and I think normally there's just one there, and that's where they fire it. It's kind of on the far end of the castle from where the Royal Mile is. You know, I just can't help but think, for the king especially, but for all members of the royal family, that they've got this, he's got such this weird mix of emotions. I mean, his whole life, he's 73 years old, has been spent preparing to become king. But the thing you've prepared your whole life for can only happen when your mother dies. And so he's got to carry out all these duties of being the king and of taking over, and something that I'm sure he's looked forward to, but at the same time also balance that with mourning his mother. And he seems like a relatively emotional guy anyway, which I think is a good thing, and I think that's only going to help moving forward. But I think here we're going to see that actual ceremony now. There's the flowers. They're going to present to the Queen Consort. Now, a couple of days before the Queen passed away, I think I don't know if we were doing a live stream or if it was just when I was making a video right before the Queen passed away, but I know it was during the video talking about the succession, and I mentioned then, and I'm glad to see it's kind of played out that way. It makes me feel a little better about kind of how I observe things. That, you know, when the king first married, then Prince Charles first married Camilla, they announced that she would be known as the Princess Consort when he became king someday. And I wondered then that if enough time went by, if that wouldn't change. And then at the beginning of this year, we saw the Queen Elizabeth make a statement where she basically announced that Camilla was going to be Queen Consort. And she laid the groundwork for that. And it seems like, for the most part, people really didn't bat an eye at it. And I had some people comment and say, oh, people aren't going to accept her because of Diana and that whole thing. Listen, it's been 25 years since Diana died. It's been, 30 years since they separated. I think people have moved on. I think people are ready to kind of get past that and what happened. And listen, I think Diana was treated horribly in some ways, and she was put in an awful situation. But I think Charles was put in an awful situation, marrying somebody he really never wanted to marry in the first place. And I think there's enough blame to go around on both sides with that. But he in the end married who he wanted to marry in the first place. And the Church of England, a lot of people wonder, well, wait a second. The king's uncle, Edward VIII, had to give up the throne because he wanted to marry a divorced woman. Why is it that now we can have a king who's married, who not only was divorced himself, but also married a divorced woman? Well, I think it was about 20 years ago, the Church of England changed their rules about allowing divorced people to remarry. And as head of the Church of England, the Supreme Governor of the Church of England, now the king, at the time with Edward VIII, he couldn't marry someone who's divorced because his marriage couldn't be recognized as valid by the church he was supposed to head. That is no longer the case, so that's why it's no longer an issue. We're going to see that ceremony here, I think, in a second. We'll skip ahead. Here it is. Coming up, I think.
Well,
not yet.
To Scotland.
He's meeting with the head of the police there.
The King will then be escorted by the General Officer of Scotland to the centre of the parade ground to receive the royal salute on
I
welcome
love those uniforms.
here at Holyrood House.
Now they're going to fire the guns. Now you notice there's no recoil. You know, this is obviously not a full charge with ammunition, and so there's no recoil on the guns like there would be if they were firing actual artillery rounds. Playing the national anthem. And for my American friends, if you've ever wondered, yes, My Country 'Tis of Thee is written to the same music as God Save the King. So they did lower the flag that was flying over the palace and raise the royal standard in its place. And you see right here the actual, like the regular cannon, and that castle has cannon everywhere. I mean, it is a fortified place, and it was actually attacked as recently as World War I. There were German Zeppelins that bombed the city of Edinburgh. And I believe that guns at Edinburgh Castle may have fired at them then. But I think it was damaged during that bombing.
While the guns fire, the 21-gun salute to welcome the King to Edinburgh, and the Guard of Honour slope armed. The officer commanding will step forward, the King's colour having been recovered, to invite the King to inspect his Guard of Honour.
Oh, interesting.
Some of them he will know from their time looking after the Queen.
So now he's going to actually inspect the Guard of Honor. Imagine being the guy he stops and talks to, right? Oh my gosh, just kind of randomly. All right, you're the one I'm going to talk to. Very cool. That's something that kid will remember for the rest of his life. And look, did you see the smile? Watch the smile on his face right at the end. That was very cool. He smiles as the King walks away.
It's where the soldiers who look after the monarch become very well known to the royal family.
That's
because
cool.
They're often
I like
around
that.
the estate. And doubtless the King will recognise many of them.
Now, if you're wondering, King Charles is about 5'10", so he's like the same height as me. If you ever see him standing next to his son, the Prince of Wales, William's like 6'2" or 6'3". He's much taller than his dad. Gosh, those uniforms are fantastic. All right. Is this the part with the keys? I think it is.
Recently at the airport. He was the first to greet His Majesty down the steps of the aircraft and then managed to get here in good time.
Yep.
So he will take the keys, and because we can't hear him, the words are, I say again, we, the Lord Provost, and members of the City of Edinburgh Council, welcome Your Majesty to the capital city of your ancient and hereditary Kingdom of Scotland, and offer for your gracious acceptance the keys of your Majesty's good city of Edinburgh. And he replies, I return these keys being perfectly convinced that they cannot be placed in better hands than those of the Lord Provost and councillors of my good city of Edinburgh. And with that, the Lord Provost introduces His Majesty to those good councillors of the city of Edinburgh.
So now we're going to watch the ceremony where they're going to begin the process of taking the Queen up the Royal Mile, back up the hill to St. Giles Cathedral, where they're going to have the ceremony.
This mournful journey. And such a short time ago.
So right there, I showed you earlier, Salzburg Crags. That's that area. It's right over top. You can look down on the palace and get some incredible views. And it's up high, but it's not a tough climb. I think my boys did it in about 10 minutes or so.
As people watch from the tops of the hills, from Salzburg Crags, looking down over Holyrood Palace. The appears from...
Of course there's bagpipes. Oh, there's nothing better than being in Edinburgh and hearing those bagpipes playing in Scotland. Oh, it's fantastic. So beautiful. Save the king. You see now the king is in a uniform for this part. Field Marshal. And here's something I wonder, and I don't know if anybody's answered this, but I'm sure there is an answer. I know that the plans have been in place for the death of the Queen for decades, if not longer. And they've had all this stuff planned out long ago. But I'm wondering, was this all in the plans if she had died, say, at Windsor Castle, outside of London? Or is this all happening because she died in Scotland, and so they adjusted the plans to include these ceremonies at Scotland? That's a question I don't have the answer to, and if somebody does know, please let me know. I wonder if they just added all of this, which I think is fantastic, and I'm so glad they're doing it.
With enormous care, the Queen is placed in the hearse. The King watches as the bearer party will recover their headdress, and gradually the procession will form for the journey up the hill to the High Kirk of St. Giles.
So even little things like how they recover the headdresses for the men who carried the coffin is just, it's all just very precise and very kind of played out perfectly. Like he walks over, hands each one to them as they go along, and then they'll all recover at the same time. Really just neat stuff. I love the ceremony of it all.
The Guard of Honour of the Royal Regiment of Scotland, with the King's colour lowered on the ground in salute to the late Queen.
Yeah, what he's talking about is right here. The King's colour is actually lowered to the ground. Now they're going to recover. And they'll probably remove them again when they get to St. Giles. So now we see, there's the King, there's the Princess Royal, Princess Anne. Admiral's uniform, I think, which makes sense. I mean, she's got that rank. And then you've got the Queen's other two children, the Earl of Wessex, Prince Edward, and then Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, who has been stripped of his military ranks, and so would be in a civilian's uniform. Whereas if this had happened, say, 2 years ago, I think, he probably would have been in a very high-ranking uniform. Let's skip ahead a little bit here. Yeah, there's Prince Andrew right there in civilian dress. And I believe this guy here is Princess Anne's husband, who also is an admiral. Timothy Lawrence, I think's his name. All very precise, all kind of lockstep. And this is not a short walk, even if walking at a normal pace. So this is going to take them a while to get up to St. Giles. It's probably a good half mile or more.
And the Earl of Wessex. Anne Forfar, dressed in his military uniform. An appointment that the Queen gave to him.
The Earl of Wessex
wears with respect.
Will eventually be made Duke of Edinburgh, like his father before him. So this is kind of a special thing for him, because this is the city for which his title will be named. The Duke of Edinburgh, that was a title created for Prince Philip, and so when he died, it was passed automatically to his eldest son, to Charles, who now has become king, and so now he can grant that title to his brother, who's the only one of his other brothers, the Duke of York, and so he'll get that title.
Mama. And following behind, Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence, who, with the Princess Royal, escorted the Queen's body down from Balmoral yesterday.
And now the same crowds that we saw kind of clapping and making noise when the Queen came through yesterday are all very silent. Man, what an incredible privilege it would be to take part in this, to be one of these soldiers, to always be able to say that you marched in this procession, guarding the Queen's body. But honestly, just even the people to be able to stand there and observe this. That's Parliament that they're passing right now, the Scottish Parliament that they're passing. So if I was at my Airbnb that I was at in July, this is almost the view we had out our window right here, right now. I'm just wondering if we're going to get a glimpse of where I stayed as they move up. That would be really, really cool. Because actually, right there's the entrance. So right here, if you go in, there is the entrance to the apartment complex where Airbnb was. So they are literally passing it right now. This is really cool. Yep, I know I keep talking about it, but it's just so cool. This red building right here, those are literally the windows of the place that we stayed. I highly recommend it if you ever get the chance. It's an Airbnb right on the Royal Mile. Wasn't real cheap, but it's such a great location. And just, here's a glimpse of how our world has changed, right? I mean, all the people, everywhere you go, you see these events, and I'm messing with my picture there. They're holding up their phones, watching this happen. This is just part of 2022, I guess. there you can get a glimpse of how it's uphill, and it's like that the entire way, all the way up to Edinburgh Castle. Like I said, it's not an easy journey, and now it looks like they're passing the
Every now and then, the sound of the
cannon
minute gun
gate,
coming
Kirk.
through the sky from Edinburgh Castle. Babies crying.
So this is whenever the Queen was in Edinburgh and staying at Holyrood, this was her church. This is where she would worship. And just as you get past it, so right behind it is a cemetery, and it's a beautiful, very cool cemetery. Adam Smith, who wrote Wealth of Nations, is right back on this side, just kind of behind this building is where he's buried. So there now you can get a glimpse, you can see the water. Like I said, I mean, it's right on the water there, and they're coming up on St. Giles now, which is this beautiful cathedral right there on the Royal Mile, and it's kind of this rare open space in front of it on an otherwise very packed area that we'll see. And we'll watch them arrive at St. Giles here in just a second. Let's just kind of listen in. They're going to go all the way to the other side of the church, I think. There's a good view there of all four of the Queen's children. There's King Charles, Princess Anne, Duke of York, Prince Andrew, and then Earl of Wessex, Prince Edward. And that's actually the order they were born in, that they're standing in right there, oldest to youngest.
And today, its doors are open to receive a queen who has served this nation for more than 70 years.
So I just noticed that there was a car following behind. I would guess that's probably the Queen Consort. Maybe somebody else is with her.
The bearer party will
Countess
move
of
back
Wessex,
into
it
position.
looks like.
The Undertaker will open the hearse door, and they will once again take up Elizabeth II, while members of the royal family are moved with the escort of the Duke of Buccleuch, Gold Stick for Scotland, ready to follow the procession into the High Kirk.
Now they'll probably remove their covers again.
The bearer party will remove their headdress.
Yep. Kind of do the ceremony in reverse like they did earlier.
By the orderlies.
And just open their hands and release and then hold them again. That's pretty cool. Everything's so precise and done a certain way. What an honor that would be. It's not easy to do either. I've been pallbearer a few times. Caskets are very heavy.
Lord Lion, King of Arms, with his heralds having taken advance, will now lead Elizabeth II down the nave to her place at the...
It's just so hard to believe. I mean, like a lot of other people, my whole life, she's been the queen. When you said the queen, everybody knew what you were talking about. And to live in a world where she's not here anymore, it's very hard to believe. And I can imagine how much more so that would be for people in the United Kingdom, or even in places like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, where she was head of state, just for her to not... I mean, it's weird enough when we change presidents every 4 or 8 years, but to have had the same head of state for 70 years. I mean, that's my mother-in-law's lifetime. My grandmother probably wouldn't remember a time when somebody else was on the throne. I love some of the views they're able to give us of all of this. And then the king will lead the procession in behind. Wonder what that baton represents that he's holding.
The fanfare.
Got the flag of Scotland on the right. The modern flag of Scotland, St. Andrew's Cross. As a former trumpet player, always cool to see that. You can actually see, a lot of the stuff that goes on we can't hear, but you can see that the guy right behind them is giving them instructions as they move to coordinate everything. Going up those steps ain't easy. Now, you might ask yourself the question, how come all the men have their hats off, but Princess Anne doesn't? Well, she's a woman. I'm assuming that's why, is that women traditionally do wear their hats in church during these services. I love that they have these views. Wow. him lay the crown. Be another amazing moment. At least I think that's what they'll do here.
Samuel Sebastian Wesley's, thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, as the royal family take their positions and the great officers of state also. And then an introduction and welcome to the service from the Reverend Callum MacLeod, the minister of St. Giles. Before all will stand and sing All People That on Earth Do Dwell.
Yeah, here comes the crown. Duke of Hamilton. Kind of the premier duke.
An echo back to ancient Scottish tradition. The crown of Scots, made in 1540. First used at the coronation of Mary, Queen of Scots in 1543, will be placed upon the coffin by the Duke of Hamilton.
So, 7 weeks ago, I was a couple feet away from that crown. It normally, the Scottish crown jewels, along with the Stone of Scone, which is sometimes referred to as the Stone of Destiny, we will see that when Charles is given his coronation, probably sometime next year. It'll be underneath St. Edward's chair. But yeah, the crown jewels are on display at Edinburgh Castle. You can go see them. The Duke of Hamilton, I believe, is like the premier duke in Scotland, non-royal duke. Long history, and yes, it is the same Hamilton family that Alexander Hamilton comes from. And proud to say I'm also descended from. Gonna bring him some stairs. And this would be the crown they would use for the opening of Parliament in Scotland too, I believe. So, a lot of folks are already familiar with this history, I know, but of course Scotland and England were once two entirely separate countries with separate governments that became united under one king when King James VI, who had already been King of Scotland for quite some time, also inherited the crown of England on the death of his cousin, Queen Elizabeth I. When Elizabeth I died, she had already followed two of her siblings in her brother Edward VI and then her sister Mary I. But none of them had any children. Henry VIII didn't have any grandchildren, at least no legitimate grandchildren. And so when Elizabeth died, the crown then passed to the next in line, which you had to go back to Henry VII. Henry VII's daughter, Margaret, had married James IV of Scotland. Their son was James V. James V's daughter was Mary, Queen of Scots, and then Mary, Queen of Scots' son was James VI of Scotland, and so the crown passed to him. But for another 100 years after that, they remained two separate kingdoms under a personal union in the monarch. Well, that changed when they created Great Britain in the very first decade of the 18th century. I think it was under Queen Anne. So then they became the Kingdom of Great Britain, which was Scotland, England, and Wales. And then they added Ireland to that about 100 years later in the early 19th century. I believe that would have been under George III, late in his reign. It became the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. And then, of course, Ireland got its independence about 100 years ago. So it seems like every 100 years or so there's a change, and it could happen again another 100 years now since the independence of Ireland, where now we have the United Kingdom of Great Britain in Northern Ireland. And we could see Scotland vote to break away from the United Kingdom, but it would go back to what it was 300 years ago. They would still have Charles as their sovereign, as their king. They would just be a separate kingdom under a personal union of the crown. So the Duke of Hamilton's a young guy. I think he's about my age. Oh, look at that crown. Oh my gosh. So think about this. This crown was worn by Mary, Queen of Scots. I mean, that's 500 years ago. Just amazing. Look at that. Wow.
Kirk, just after her coronation in 1953.
I welcome all of you to St. Giles Cathedral, the High Kirk, this ancient parish church of Edinburgh.
Love his accent.
Welcome to all around the world who are watching this service being broadcast. Here at St. Giles, John Knox confronted Mary, Queen of Scots. Here, James VI argued about liturgy. Here, Oliver Cromwell preached.
Wow.
Here, Parliament sometimes met.
So he's sitting there just giving you a rundown of some of the history that has taken place in these halls where they are right now. That's just, again, one of the things I love about Europe and the United Kingdom, places like this. You know, we in America, we just have no idea of what old really means. To us, old is 200 years. That's brand spanking new over there. Think about the history of things that took place here.
Here, our late Queen received the honours of Scotland, and the Stone of Destiny rested on its return to Scotland.
So the Stone of Scone had been in English hands for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it was only returned in the 20th century to Scotland. It was stolen at one point by some college students, and there's a crack in it that's been repaired, and there's some debate about how that happened. Some people say that it happened, there was a bomb that went off. I want to say at Westminster Abbey or wherever the stone was being held early in the 20th century. It was a bomb as part of a protest by women suffragettes, people fighting for the right to vote for women. And then, of course, these college students stole it and eventually gave it back. And I think typically the story is that it broke when they had it, but I think they claimed it was already broken and it just hadn't been discovered yet.
We are graced by the presence of the King and members of the royal family. Present here are representatives of our nation's life. Present here are people whose lives were touched by the Queen in so many unforgettable ways.
This guy is striking just the absolute perfect tone for this occasion. He's speaking at a nice, slow but deliberate pace. Obviously, he doesn't get in a position like this without being a good communicator, but I just feel like he's doing so well with this.
And so we gather to bid Scotland's farewell to our late monarch, whose life of service to the nation and the world we celebrate, and whose love for Scotland was legendary. Let us worship God.
So I understand many of you who are watching are not believers, either Christian or of some other faith. And that's fine. You're all welcome here. Obviously myself, I am a Christian. And for Christians, you know, these moments it's hard to describe because obviously there's great sadness for us who are left behind. You know, last year when we lost my brother, biologically my uncle, but he was my brother. We were raised together in the same house. It was very, very sad. It was desperately sad. And especially, thinking of Zach, his son, 15 years old, without his dad. Holly, his widow. My grandpa, who lost his youngest son. It was desperately sad. But as it's written in Scripture, we believers, we don't grieve the same way that others might grieve. We don't grieve as those without hope, because we believe. And believes, I don't think a strong enough word. I know as sure as I'm sitting here talking to you right now, that when I take my last breath here on earth, that I will awake to a place that is as real as the place where I am right now. And so the grief is in being separated. It's not a loss in that we will never see them again. So I know that's what her family are feeling right now, is this deep sense of loss in that she's not there anymore. But it's also in some ways a celebration that this 96-year-old woman who had a 96-year-old body is now free of that and is made whole again. It's an incredible thought, really, to the believer.
Our help is in the name of the Lord, who made heaven and earth.
From Psalms.
The eternal God is our refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms.
Psalm 46.
God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in time of trouble.
Love that scripture.
The choir will sing the Précis.
He did a prayer.
Psalm 118 will be sung by Karen Mattison. I shall not die,
but they got a harp.
And shall the works of God discover.
She's singing in Gaelic? She must be. Beautiful. Love it. Love it. Now that was a really cool camera shot right there, where they start focused on the royal family. You see the Countess of Wessex, Prince Edward, Prince Andrew, the king, and then the queen consort, and then it changes the focus back to her. Love it. Love it. So here we see, there's the Prime Minister right there. Could you imagine being Liz Truss right now? She becomes Prime Minister. Like the last photo we have of Queen Elizabeth II alive is her on the day she receives Liz Truss as the new Prime Minister. And then boom, your second full day as Prime Minister, the Queen of 70 years dies. And suddenly you are at the forefront of all of this. This is the chief minister of Scotland or something. Forget her title. We've seen her a few times already this week.
For everything there is a season,
Ecclesiastes.
and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal,
Yes,
a
it's a
time
song.
to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow.
So this is a scripture that even people who aren't Christians are familiar with. It comes from Ecclesiastes. It's in that famous song, "To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season." But there's more to that scripture than that. It talks about God has made everything beautiful for its own time, and it talks about how God has planted eternity on the hearts of people. And he's trying to give perspective there, right? Because we are finite creatures. To us, everything has a beginning and an end. That's why it's very difficult for some people to accept the idea of there being a creator. And I'm not trying to get into religious debate about things like that, because it's difficult for us to believe that something could have existed before any of this existed. And that's because we have finite minds. Things have beginnings and ends. And this scripture is very much about trying to step back from seeing beginning and end and understanding that there's an eternal perspective as well.
A time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. What gain have the workers from their toil? I have seen the business that God has given to everyone to be busy with. He has made everything suitable for its time. Moreover, he has put a sense of past and future into their minds. Yet they cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. I know that there is nothing better for them than to be happy and enjoy themselves as long as they live. Moreover, it is God's gift that all should eat and drink and take pleasure in all their toil. I know that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done this so that all should stand in awe before him. That which is already has been. That
eternity.
which is to be already is. And God seeks out what has gone by. Here ends the first lesson.
Beautiful, beautiful. She did a great job reading
The
that
Crimond,
too.
a setting of Psalm 23, will be sung by the choir.
So I'm kind of skipping over like the songs and stuff just because I guess there's not a lot to add to that, but I encourage you. I'm going to put a link in the description to Sky News where I'm watching this, and you can go back and watch everything for like the last 12 hours that has been on Sky News and catch up on anything you would have missed, including all of this. And I encourage you to do that and listen to the songs. They're beautiful.
Following Psalm 116, the Right Reverend.
A reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Romans. I consider that the sufferings of this present time
Another good
are
one.
not worth comparing with the glory about to be revealed to us. We know that all things work together for good for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose.
And, you know, one of the things I always tell people about that scripture is sometimes we misinterpret things that God only allows good things to happen to us. And that is not at all the case. In fact, Jesus said quite the opposite would be true. What he says is he causes all things to work together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. Doesn't mean all things are good. In fact, some really crappy things happen to us sometimes. But God can use the crappy stuff too, is what he's saying.
What then are we to say about these things?
If God is for us,
If God is for us,
who can be against
who is
us?
against us? He who did not withhold his own Son, but gave him up for all of us, will he not with him also give us everything else? Who will bring any charge against God's elect? It is God who justifies. Who is to condemn? It is Christ Jesus who died, yes, who was raised, who is at the right hand of God, who indeed intercedes for us.
So one of the things I love, and listen, King Charles is not perfect. None of us are, just as a reminder. I love just in watching him in these moments where we get to see him. You know, most people would do what the others are doing, and I think that's probably what I would be doing, which is kind of reading and following along of what's happening. He's looking around and just taking it all in. He's listening, he's observing. That tells me something about the man and how he kind of thinks and operates.
Who is at the right hand of God, who indeed intercedes for us. Who will separate us from the love of Christ? Will hardship, or distress, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or peril, or sword? As it is written, for your sake we are being killed all day long. No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am convinced that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord.
Love that
Here
one.
ends the epistle.
Love that one. Now, as a West Brom fan, I approve of this one because this is actually one of the things that West Brom supporters chant at games. They sing, "The Lord's my shepherd."
According to St. John.
So he's going to read from John, and these are going to be words, I'm sure, the same words that most of us use at funerals. This is Jesus the night that he was arrested, the night before he goes to the cross in the Gospel of John. And he's just basically preparing his disciples for what's about to come. And he's basically telling them, listen, don't worry. It's going to be okay. And these are words we use to comfort people at funerals all the time.
Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, so that where I am, there you may be also. And you know the way to the place where I'm going. Jesus said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled.
Do not be afraid.
And do not let them be afraid.
And you know, if you are somebody who has just lost your mother, your grandmother, a spouse, those are words of great comfort if you are a believer and you believe that they've gone to heaven. He's saying, listen, I'm going to prepare a place for you. And if I'm going to prepare a place, I'm going to come back and take you there. So don't be troubled. Don't be afraid. Don't worry. everything's going to be okay in the end. That's what this family needs to hear right now. So then they had a guy give basically a short sermon, like a homily, kind of just talking a little bit about remembering her. And then we've got another song. And then what begins is one of my favorite kind of rituals of these royal funerals that we have seen before. And I'll show you some examples of what I mean. They're going to bring some of the royal archers, I believe, which are like the Queen's personal bodyguard. And they're going to come up and start guarding. So here they come. And they're going to take watch at each of the four corners. And I believe at some point, whether it's here, I would guess it's probably going to be at Westminster Hall where the Queen will lie in state. But they'll do something called the Vigil of the Princes. And I don't know which princes it will be yet. It'll be interesting to see if it'll be the Queen's four children or if it'll be someone else. When the Queen Mother died 20 years ago, we had the Queen Mother's grandchildren. I think it was her four grandsons. It was the three sons of Queen Elizabeth and then the son of Princess Margaret, who took turns standing at these four spots. You had the same thing happen back many years ago. In fact, let me see if I can pull it up. So this is when it happened in 2002, and apparently they are going to... It first happened in 1936 at the death of King George V, when you had... I'm trying to remember who it was then that would have done it, but I'm just looking up. It's called Vigil of the Princes. I mean, it's literally what they call it. But apparently they're going to do it in Scotland, so that'll be interesting to see. So Princess Albert, which is the future King George VI, Henry and George, and then King Edward VIII. So it was the four grandsons of... No, it would have been four sons of King George V, because King Edward VIII and then Prince Albert, who became King George VI, those were George V's sons. So it was grandsons of the Queen Mother when they did it in 2002. So, and I guess it's going to happen here at about 2 o'clock this afternoon, U.S. Eastern Time, like 7:20 in the evening in the UK is when that's going to happen. That they're going to do the Vigil of the Princes. So definitely check all of that out. But let me know your thoughts about all this. And do you want to see me do more of this and cover some of the other highlights of some of the things that we're seeing and talk a little bit more about the history behind it and give my thoughts? Let me know in the comment section below. I'll put a link to Sky News where you can watch all of this in its entirety for yourself without my commentary. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.